into the modules, don't they, Miguel?
Yes, we do. Okay.
So you have an idea.
Yeah. So when you're finished with your exam, you'll know exactly how you did. But actually, your real exam, you'll know exactly how you did on each section. Okay. So if you're not successful, for the first time, you'll see what module you will need to touch upon. Okay. What else? We're gonna record all classes. So just in case you do miss one, just let us know and we'll send you the link for that video. Okay, what else? Please bring a calculator to at least these first four modules, because you will be crunching numbers.
Particularly for next week, because we'll start some business analysis next week.
We have a lot of counting to do.
Calculator or phone would be good.
Okay, just one better than what's on your phone. It doesn't have to be a scientific one. Okay? You know what I mean? Not the simple ones. Let's put it that way.
Just a simple calculator. It doesn't need to be a scientific one. There's no complicated formulas.
Okay.
The formulas are straightforward.
You don't have module 6. I'm just waiting for my lecturer to go over module 6 to make sure everything is up to date. Okay? But so far you have modules 1 to 5. Hopefully I've covered everything. If not, just see me. Okay?
Yeah, now what we normally do is we normally have a little bit of an icebreaker where each person introduces themselves. You don't need to stand up. Just introduce yourself to the group. You know who you are, where you're from, and very important for us is, you know, why are you interested in the financial planner course?
Okay, my name is Indira Gibson. I am with private banking at On Sparkle. I'm interested in the financial planner course because any, I guess, course that would allow me to watch a client's 500,000 go to 1 million is what I'm interested in doing.
Excellent, yes, because you'll find, you know, during the program, we'll give you quite a wide-ranging knowledge base, which is very practical. So it's not an academic course. You know, there is academic content at a good level, but the thrust of the course is as practical as we can make it. You know, so you'll go back to your job, and hopefully you'll find your job is a bit easier, and you'll feel more confident. Particularly when we start to look at some of the business situations where the client sitting opposite to you, you know, might be quite a wealthy client based on their business performance. So we need you to feel comfortable that if they're talking about, you know, how the business is performing, you'll have a good understanding of that. So when we start on financial situation analysis part 2, which we'll probably start on next week, you know, we'll start to explore some of those areas. So thank you very much, yes.
Prescott Adley. I work at Aquina Financial Advisors Limited. I work in external asset management. I'm an attorney, and I've been able to sort of skate by on my regulatory function in relation to the corporate management, and it's getting to a point now where I need to be a bit more well informed in terms of what's happening with the companies I'm managing from a financial perspective.
Yes, that's right. So you'll be very strong on the legal issues as we progress to some of the later modules, but we'll be able to help you sharpen up that other side as you're suggesting. Thank you.
Marlon Charles. I work for Ansbacher Bahamas. Everything that I've done to date leads back to some form of financial planning or the other. So why not this course?
Right. Okay. Welcome.
Ken Donathan, Galena Real Estate. Just improving my overall business and financial acumen.
Excellent. Thank you.
I'm Abby Ferguson. I work at Bank of the Bahamas, and I realize that my degree is not enough, so I'm trying to further my career.
Yes, well, your degree, what subject did you take?
Banking and finance.
Excellent. Well, that will help you, you know, on some of the case studies that we'll be looking at, but obviously we'll enlarge that in terms of financial planning advice. Is Miguel still in the room?
No.
No, he's not.
No, okay. It's just I can't see the people on the who are now
Hi.
talking.
My
on
name
that
is
side of the
Anishka.
table.
Sorry,
Camera?
Anishka Comer, and I'm with Kalina
What
Group.
section is it? Well, I just can't see it clear.
This one here?
No, up there. I think.
Yeah, that's it.
Thanks. If you just swing it around a bit, that would be great.
Is this working?
Is it?
It's
No.
not moving.
His actual.
Laptop.
Is
Yeah,
it all
Probably
laptop?
have to give him a shout. Yeah.
Miguel! Miguel! Yeah? I'm breaking for sure.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll carry on.
Yeah, okay. My name is Anishka Comer, and I'm with the Kalina Group.
You say you can't see us.
At least
Everyone
Miguel.
it's that end of the room.
after can.
Yeah.
Not see the people. Yeah.
My reason
Yes.
for
Go to the
taking
left, go to the left.
You need to zoom out a bit or switch it a bit.
Well, you can't see us at all?
It stops. No, he can see us. It stops at Ken though. He can't see.
Okay, well, sorry.
Yeah, I can see all the people on my
Oh.
right-hand side, which are just behind you, Miguel, but I can't see anybody on my left-hand side.
No, I'm sorry with that.
Yeah.
Is it bumped, right?
Yeah.
Hold on 1 second and check it. How about now?
It's freezing.
I don't see him.
Yeah, it just froze there.
Okay,
And the sound's gone right down.
how about now?
It's still very quiet. And I still can't see the people on the other side of the room.
Gonna pivot the laptop.
You have two different cameras up.
Yeah, well, actually,
All I can see now is a gentleman in a white t-shirt with a
hello.
That's what
red right.
Miguel, he's looking through the camera up there. He has to turn the actual laptop
That's
this
a
way.
lawyer, I mean
Yeah,
lawyer.
that's what he did.
Yeah, 'cause this one isn't connected.
Okay.
Yeah. Try and get a better angle if you can.
Is that better?
No, a little bit more.
A little more.
A little bit more.
Continue with the introductions, that'll be fine
Okay,
while the
yeah.
girls
alright.
fixing
But
that.
he's not gonna be able to see the whole.
No.
thing.
Yeah, no.
Okay, Anishka Comer, and I'm with the Kalina Group, Kalina Real Estate. And I took the course because I'd like to expand my knowledge for personal use as well as all of the clients that I contact in trying to help and with financial advice.
Is there a discount because all of us are from Airport?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, that could be a possibility.
Could we get it?
It freeze again.
Check, are you still there?
You're breaking up now, Miguel.
I shouldn't be.
Okay, we better just do this because you're interfering with the sound now.
Yeah.
You still got your Ethernet cable in?
Yes, my Ethernet cable is directly in.
Okay, well, let's continue.
Sorry about that,
Okay,
folks.
so welcome everybody.
No, we have one more person, right? We have one more person, Jacqueline.
Yeah, Antoine Hinsey, from Ann Sparker. I work in credit. I also work AF Holdings as well. I do card services and clients directly in regards to investment. And I just wanted to increase my knowledge in that area so that I can be able to, deliver my information with confidence to clients.
Excellent, well done. So yes, Miguel mentioned this is our 10th year. The first time we did it was 2007 at the Goodman Bay Corporate Centre. So that was quite a landmark in terms of Nassau and in terms of the Bahamas, because it was the first online program that had ever been done out of Nassau. So we were, way ahead of the College of Bahamas and other places, and we networked in the Family Islands. So it was quite a revolutionary thing, and it worked really, really well. So that was our first certified program using online techniques in 2007. And Miguel will tell you the number of people that have gone through satisfactory is quite large. And what we decided to do last year, in response to a number of inquiries, was to develop a follow-on program or a fast-track entry program for people, you know, who'd been in the industry a long time. So that was called the Wealth Manager, and you might have seen that advertised. So depending on, you know, how you feel after the end of this program, you might consider at some future date having a look at the Wealth Manager, where we deal with very, very large businesses as a source of wealth management. And in the program this year, we used, for example, Walmart as a case study, and we looked at the strategies of Walmart and how, you know, they are so exclusive to them. And then we looked in great depth at the generation of the cash flow by way of the distribution to these very wealthy businesses. So it was a very interesting case to look at. So there is a progression to this program, you know, at a later stage if you feel that you would like it. Okay, so let's make a start today. So what you should have in there is you should have financial situation analysis part 1, which is what we're going to start on this morning. And then you should also have financial situation analysis part 2, which we'll probably start on next week, depending, you know, on the progress that we're making. And you should also have a case study section. Can you see that as well?
Yes.
Excellent. Now what I'd encourage you to do is when we turn to the case studies, particularly, you know, to try and bring the program to life, we have a number of case studies. The case studies, some of them you'll find there's no, you know, definite right or wrong answer, because at the end of the day, you know, we're talking about financial planning, we're talking about aspects of money and finance, that some of it will be opinions, and some of your opinions, you know, will be swayed towards the type of person that you're dealing with. So I think a good place to start is if you just write down the words KYC, you know, right on the top of that financial situation analysis part 1, just put KYC, which of course stands for Know Your Customer. And in Nassau, you're very familiar with this already because it's very strong, you know, within the Compliance Association. In any anti-money laundering course you ever go on, you know, they'll always talk about knowing your customer. Now it's the same. One gentleman mentioned he worked in cards and credit. I'm sure he would agree it's similar for him because they need to know their customers, you know, before they're making the issue of a card. Now it's the same in financial planning. It's really, really key to know your customer. You know, is it a small account with a very personal client, or is it a much wealthier businessman that's deriving, or business lady that's deriving money, you know, from the business? And again, the cultural aspects would come in to play as well, because I know now you're getting lots more Chinese people coming in to Nassau. We've got lots of them in London. I was with them again 2 days earlier this week, Chinese investors in London, and you have the same taking place. And dealing, for example, with Chinese people, you'll find is much different to dealing with Bahamian people or dealing with American people. So again, we have to be, you know, culturally aware of the person that we're sitting opposite to. And then one of the case studies that we'll look at, we'll find it's quite a difficult situation that you're facing, which is why in Module 2, we start talking about client relationship skills. Because you know as well as I from your experiences to date, you know, some people are quite easy to deal with, aren't they? But some people are very, very difficult. You know, some people, although you're trying to help them, will be extremely secretive. You know, they don't really want to tell you anything. And when you're trying to find out, if they have a business, trying to find out business things, they can be very reluctant to give you information. Some people are the opposite of that. They'll overwhelm you with information and they keep talking about all sorts of things that you really don't want to know, you know, and we need to know how to best tackle that. So in Module 2, we'll look at client relationship skills and we'll try and take some structured approaches to handling interviews, and in particular, how we might handle, you know, the more difficult interview. So just for today then, we're going to start with financial situation analysis part 1. And you should see this on the screen as well as in your book there. So within this first section, what we're trying to do is talk a little bit more about know your customer, and can we take a structured approach to knowing the client. That will help us in our processes. Can we analyze and respond to a variety of differing financial scenarios? And that's what you're going to find a lot in terms of financial planning. Almost every customer you deal with, you know, would be in a different circumstance, and unless you have the skills to properly analyze the situation, then what you come up with, you know, by way of planning or planning advice or investment advice or whatever you're looking at, you know, that plan can be flawed and it won't work if you don't really understand what the situation is. So we spend quite a lot of time trying to get into this, trying to analyze these different scenarios. Next point is constructing a personal financial profile of the client. Now, I know you're from different organizations, so your organizations will have different profiling documents, but what we will look at is the fundamental documents that we will need to understand what's going on. And then when we move into the business situation, you'll see we draw upon those fundamental document experiences to analyze the business, to try and make it as straightforward as possible. Now, I know you've got Samuel Wilkinson a little bit later in the program, and he, of course, is an accountant, so he has an advantage over us there. But generally, most of us working, you know, in this sector are not accountants, so we do need to have an understanding, you know, of some of the figure work from the income statement, for example, you know, from the cash flows and from the balance sheets. And some of this can be a little bit daunting, but we try and take our time to make sure you understand that. The next point there is constructing a forecast. And again, on one of the case studies we'll be looking at, this case will clearly illustrate that we need a forecast in certain situations, particularly if the person that we're trying to help in terms of financial planning has got a bit of a problem, yeah? We're going to need to try and help with a forecast or a budget. You know, you'll find all the time there's lots of terminology that we have to cope with. I mean, you cope with that right now in your everyday job. There's lots of different words meaning the same thing. And of course, your work is a bit more difficult because of your proximity to the USA. Because as you know, for example, and I mentioned the Wealth Manager program, when we're looking at Walmart, of course, Walmart is constructed on US accounting systems. You know, when I worked twice in New York, I asked the American bankers, I asked them why, you know, you guys, Americans, you feel you're very international, but why won't you use international accounting standards? And they told me, you expect the answer from America, well, you know, our accounts are the best, so that's why we don't go international, which of course I thought was a very poor answer, because at the time we just had Enron, the world's largest bankruptcy, which is American corporation, Tyco we'd had, WorldCom, and then we had the investment scandal with Madoff out of New York. So I don't share that opinion, but nevertheless, we've got to cope with international accounting, which the rest of the world has moved towards, and the US accounting. So you'll have to face that. So again, that's why in this program, you know, we'll be dipping from one side to the other, you know, to get you well prepared. And then where there are investments already being made, or where the person you're dealing with has a large amount of debt and they want some assistance in trying to manage that debt, you know, we're going to need to know how to monitor and control. So starting us off, here's the introduction. So general principles. What we're going to take, and the ladies will be pleased with this because generally ladies have a very logical approach. I'm afraid afraid our sex tends to be a little bit more haphazard in our approach, but that's not fair to me because some of the men in the room might be very strict in their process. So we're going to take a logical approach. So it won't be academic, it will be logical, trying to solve the situation on the things we're looking at. And then the next bit's very important, the ability to interpret both the financial information and the non-financial information given by the client. So that's very important. So it's not just about figures and numbers in financial planning. It's also about, the marketplace. If we're looking at a business situation, the products, the competition, and the management skills, etc., etc. And then point number 3, which is where it starts to get more difficult, is we need to develop our capacity to draw conclusions from this interpretation. So it's a step-by-step process. So we're going to try and get as much information we can on the financial side, and then on the non-financial side, and then we've got to try and draw conclusions from that, because until we draw the conclusions, we can't balance them and reach an overall decision. And then the final point there is the ability to apply good judgment and common sense throughout the process. Anyone, any questions on that so far?
No.
No, that's fine. So we're going to start then with our first framework, so a framework for assessment. So whether you're dealing with a person in employment or a director in a business situation, the following framework will help us focus on an approach to the assessment. All the points are important, and the 5th point is a key issue, certainly in knowing your clients. So we'll take a look at that next. So on the next page, we've got our first framework. So a good starting point is, what's the income of the person that we're dealing with, because straight away that's going to give us a lot of focus. If they say, $10,000 a year, well, that's fine. We've got the figure, we've got the picture. If they say to you, 10 million a year, that'll sharpen up your attention focus immediately. And if it's like the Chinese people I was with earlier in the year, and if they say $1 billion a year as their personal income, well, then you're going to be in, for a really, really tough meeting. And then, here we go, what is the source? And do you know why this question is so important? Again, it's because, of possible money laundering and other activities where we have to be really, really careful in offshore jurisdictions. Not because we're not careful already, it's just because we're always being watched, aren't we? We're always being watched by other external bodies, looking at the Caribbean. In my experience, I've worked in the Caribbean for 29 years now. In my experience, generally in the Caribbean, you're actually better at these aspects than they are, for example, in the USA or in Russia, or to a degree in the UK. You might have read recently that Hong Kong's Shanghai Bank, they've been involved in a huge money laundering experience linked to one of their offices in Russia. And you would think, one of the world's leading banks, wouldn't get that type of situation occurring, but that's what does occur. So second point, what's to be done with the money? So we're talking about their income, what are they doing with the money? Is it generally just to cover the bills that they've got? Or will they have surplus income that they're wanting to invest? Or is all of the money, going towards a debt servicing position? Which leads us on to point number 3. What are the plans for investment? So do they have any investment plans that we can review with them? And repayment of any debts. So we're interested in what the debt scheduling is. Then what will be the client's position if these plans go wrong? So if you want to make a note there, we're looking at contingency. Is there any contingency plan? Is there any fallback position if things don't quite work out as they're intending? And then what's the work experience and financial track record of the client? So again, track record, we'll come on to this time and time again because it'll be really important from a personal aspect. What's the personal track record of the person that we're dealing with, or if we're looking at the business, we're taking the same approach. We're trying to find out what's the business track record. Has it been quite volatile, some profits, some losses, or is it quite a steady, conservative run business that's been around a long time? So these are the logical things that we're looking for. Now, what we'll find in financial planning, there are a number of frameworks that we can use, which we tend to call aid memoir. Now, aid memoir is from the French, which is an aid to the memory, and they've always been known as this for a long, long time, and there's quite a number of these. Now, the most popular one globally is called Campari, which we'll come on to shortly. And a number of you will know that Campari is actually a drink. It's a liqueur drink, so it's easy to remember. We'll come on to Campari a little bit later. And there are others, such as Parza, which is in a later unit. But the first one of all of these aid memoirs was the 3 C's, standing for the character of the person that you're dealing with, what capital do they have, and what's their capability as a person. Now, this can also be used in a business situation. So we can say the 3 C's, what's the character of the people who are running the business, what capital does the business have, and what's the capability of the business moving forward. In other words, is it a sustainable type of business? So here's a very simple one, those 3 C's, but that's been around a long, long time. A lot of people still use it. It's a good framework. Now here's another one, SAS, stability. How long has the client, lived in that house? What's the current work position? How long have they had a bank account? Do they have family commitments? Are they honouring the commitments, etc., etc.? So that would be looking for the stability of the person that you're dealing with. What's their attributes? In other words, their skills and their knowledge. And if they've got debts that they're looking at, can they service the debts? And have they pledged any security or collateral to the bank if they're in a borrowing situation? So these are a few of the mnemonics you can use. In your own organization, you might already be using, one of those, or you might have a different one altogether. My job is to show you the ones that's in use more frequently. Now the next bit is slightly tedious, so we won't spend too long on this bit here, because this really is a process that I'm sure you will all have in your own institutions. And what we're trying to extract from the client is information, yeah? So what's the background of the person? Do they have an account with us? If so, what's the account number? What's their occupation? If they're employed, who's their employer? How many years have they been there? What's the marital status? Do they have any dependents? What's the age of the person you're dealing with? Are they in good health? What's their income? What's their assets? And moving down the page, what investment plans do they have? And do we know about any conduct of investment accounts that they've got already? And then moving and continuing on to the next page, if they have banking facilities at the moment, where are the facilities? If they're not with you, which bank or office are they with? Do they have any debts? What's the source of repayment? Then you'll see I put their disposable income, and then in brackets budget planner. We're going to come on to that a bit later, the importance of a budget planner. And then is there any safety margin between their income and their expenses? And then there's some information, checklist documents there, bank account details, what's their track record, previous statements, what's their personal details, employment details, details of assets. So all of those things I'm sure you'll be really familiar with, and this is information gathering. Now, the purpose of all this, once again, is KYC. It's trying to get to know the person. Now, where this is leading is to one of the really, really, really key documents, and this is the personal balance sheet that we're going to come on to next. Now, this is really important because when we move on to small businesses, what we will do is a small business balance sheet. When we move to larger businesses, we'll have a larger business balance sheet, and you'll see straight away these are all basically, in concept, they're all exactly the same. Now, what I could do now is I could stop now and say to you, look, what I want you to do for the next 5 minutes is do your own personal balance sheet. It's not difficult. All you would need to do is make a list of your personal assets. You know, that's the things you own. Like maybe you have your own property, you have your own car, or whatever. So you'd make a list of your assets. And then, of course, on the opposite side of the balance sheet, you make a list of your liabilities, yeah? And then what we're looking for from the people that we're dealing with is when we take the assets away from the liabilities, can you see at the bottom there, personal net worth?
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Yes.
And
Yes.
that will be part of our job as financial planners. If we can help the client to do this, they may well have already done it, which will be good. What we're hoping to see year by year is an improvement in their personal net worth. And I would suggest to you that's what we try to do in our own lives, isn't it? You know, if you're interested in improving yourself, which most people are, you know, what we're trying to do is improve what we're actually worth. So we like to use this term, personal net worth. You know, some people would call it surplus. When we go in to look at businesses, the business surplus can be called, you know, net tangible assets, can be called capital and reserves, it can be called shareholder funds, all these different words, but at the end of the day, it's exactly the same. If we looked at the Atlantis Hotel, you know, we could list all the assets of the Atlantis Group, list all the liabilities, and then we'd come with an Atlantis Group net worth position. If we went into John Bull in Bay Street, we could do the same, couldn't we? Just list all the assets in John Bull, list all the liabilities, and we come to John Bull net worth. So in principle, I think you agree with me, it's quite straightforward. But in practice, it's very difficult, you know, getting all of these items extracted, and particularly when we're looking at some of the larger businesses, because, you know, they have a lot more entries, but it shouldn't put us off. So if you try and keep in your own mind, the balance sheet is a moment in time, so we could do it right now, Saturday 17th of June, you could do your own personal balance sheet, you know, and then maybe in 6 months' time, you could take a look at that and see if things have changed, have things got better, or if things got worse. Hopefully it'll get better, but you know as well as I do, life is not like that. You know, life tends to be swings and roundabouts, and that's the same when you're looking in terms of financial planning with business situations. We have to remember, you know, business is not textbook exercise. Business doesn't just go like this, you know, on a steady upward slope. You know, businesses flop around, don't they? Depending on what's happening in terms of competition and in terms of the sector. And you'll know this well yourselves, with tourism being your #1 sector. You know, you have concentrations within the tourism industry that's going to affect businesses that you're looking at. How many ships are in Nassau today? How many cruise ships?
I think it's 4.
4? That's good. Yeah. When I come to Nassau, not as frequently as I used to come 3 times a year. I only usually come once a year now because of the internet. But when I come, if I'm staying at the Hilton that Miguel usually puts me in very kindly, you know, the first thing I do is have a look how many ships are in, because that gives me an immediate barometer of how things are going. So this balance sheet will take some time to fill in, but it will give us a great deal of information about the client. You know, for example, you see straight away, do they own their own property or are they renting? You know, what sort of assets have they got and what sort of liabilities have they got? If you did this form today in the UK, you'd have to be prepared, because you'll find that about 20% of the total population in the UK, when you get to personal net worth, you'd have a minus figure. You'd have negative net worth. Why? Because their major asset, with a lot of people in the UK, is the property that they live in. And of course, following the global crisis in 2008, you'll know as well as I do, property prices collapsed. But of course, when you look at the liability, which would be the mortgage or the loan to the bank, okay, that's gone down a bit through repayments, but in a lot of people's situation, the value of the property is less than the mortgage, so they're in a negative net worth position. They can still continue to live. It just means, if they wanted to dispose of the property now, they're probably going to come out in a negative position. And you've seen this a lot in Florida, haven't you, where there's been lots and lots of property repossessions in the USA.
Yeah.
So that's a very important document. Now, the next document you'll see is the budget planner. So if you think here of income and expenditure, that's all this simply is. Now, what you'll find in my experience as financial planners is during the conversation, quite often when you come to this part is more difficult than getting the information for the balance sheet. This part is more difficult because some people don't really, want to face the fact of how their budget actually is. And this is particularly true when you're dealing with a client in a difficult situation. They quite often they won't want to face up to this reality, but they've got to, because that's the only way that you can help them. Unless you get the full detail, how can you help them in terms of financial planning? So here we'd have all of the monthly expenditures. Some people might want to do it weekly. And then we've got the monthly total, and then we've got the monthly income, and hopefully, we're going to have an average surplus per month. So these are two of the key documents in personal financial planning. It'll be the balance sheet, so we can see their assets and their liabilities, and it'll be their income statement and expenditure. Now what we're going to come on to next is this Campari framework, and what we'll do is, so you don't get incredibly bored with me talking non-stop all the time, we're going to do a case study. We're going to use this framework to help you analyze the situation of a personal client. So I'll just take you quickly through the framework, the Campari framework, and then I'll direct you towards the case study on which we're going to use this framework. So we talked about the 3 C's, we talked about the SAS, stability, etc., and then we also mentioned briefly Campari. Now Campari, you can see the letters of Campari standing for the character of the person, and of course that's really difficult because again, we're back to know your customer. The person that you're dealing with, are they a person of integrity, which is a lovely word, very hard to find out. Are they an honest person? And of course, unfortunately, sometimes people change, don't they? The person that you were dealing with was a person of integrity, but then for some reason, something's happened in their life, which has made them change, or they made some foolish decisions. What's the stability? What's the track record of investments, resources, etc.? What's their ability? The margin is the commercial aspect of what you're looking at. What's the purpose? Why are they coming to see you? Is it for savings or is it for debt repayment? What's the amount? What's the repayment plans or investment plans? And do they have any insurance and any security that they might have given to financial institutions? So keep that page open to one side, and then if you go into the case study section, and it's quite a few cases in on my electronic document. I'm not too sure how it arrives in your folder, but you're looking for a case study called John Edwards. It's when you find it, try and help your neighbour to locate it.
Page, like a second set of page 9.
Thanks.
Give me one.
Right before module 2, right at the end.
It'll be the
Once
second
again,
case study you get.
the case study section.
Right before module 2, last page. All the way over, bang. So, yeah.
This is usually the hardest part and the material.
No idea. No evidence that we can find.
It's not numbered very efficiently.
No.
Right, well, you need to complain to Miguel. Okay, so what you see is, here's this case of John Edwards, has been a client for 5 years. He's married with 2 years old, and for most of the time he's operated a satisfactory bank account with occasional overdrafts. Now, Edwards has called in to see you, you'll see from the second paragraph. Now, what I'd like you to do is just spend, say, 5 minutes reading this through and highlighting or underlining, things that catch your eye. And then what we'll do is I'll get you to work in 2s or in 3s, whichever is most convenient for you, to start to have a discussion about Edward's situation, looking at the Campari framework to try, and help you do this in a structured way, and then we'll have a discussion about it. So I'll mute my mic for about 5 minutes while you read it through, and then we'll continue with the discussion.
You got one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, then you can see that Edwards is looking at a couple of options. So what's probably best to do is just to have a look at the mathematics behind these two options together, and then we'll have a chat about how you feel on the Campari side. Excuse me a second. So it's the trouble when you're online talking a lot. Okay, so if we make a note of this together so we can see exactly where we are. So what he's saying, first of all, in the third paragraph, is he's going to approach his bank to ask for a loan of $2,500 to enable him to clear his overdraft, mortgage arrears, and pay outstanding bills. So let's have a look on the Campari framework. You'll see there's a section on the amount. So let's have a look at this 2,500 and see if it's accurate. So clear his overdraft. What's his overdraft? Overdraft in the first paragraph stands at 950. So if you write down 950, then he wants to clear his mortgage arrears. Let's see if we can find that.
900.
Mortgage arrears 900. And pay outstanding bills. He's got outstanding bills in the second paragraph there.
300.
There's 300, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And then
150.
150. So I've got 950, 900, 300, and 150. If we add those together, $2,300.
Mm-hmm.
So that's option one that he's going to want to be discussing with you. Now, option number two is where, in fourth paragraph, as an alternative, he could ask his bank to consider taking over debts he has to finance companies totaling $3,000, pay off his credit card balance, to give total loan requirement of $7,000. So let's have a look at the mathematics on that. So what we would start with on the second option is the $2,300 total we had from the first option, and then we need to add to the $2,300 this amount due to finance companies of $3,000, and then this credit card, which is further up there, 1,500, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So we've got 2,300, 3,000, and 1,500. So I make that a total of $6,800.
Mm-hmm.
So these are the two options. The loan request of 2,500 or the loan request of $7,000. So the first thing we would need to discuss is, which of these options do you think, as a financial planner, would be the best in this situation? Anyone want to start the conversation? Now, there's no right or wrong answer, okay? So it's a matter of opinion, and it's a matter of how you would wish to approach this. What's your thoughts, anybody?
I'm thinking from the position of the financial institution.
Yeah.
John is not appearing to be a client that is managing his financial situation very well. And
Correct.
I'm not entirely comfortable with the idea of giving him more money that for him to not be able to pay back to us.
Okay, so that's very good comment. So what document could we then move to with Mr. Edwards during the interview situation to try and pick up on those very valid comments that you've just made? So which of the documents that we're looking at could we immediately go for?
Budget planner.
Yeah, very good, budget planner. So the budget planner would be absolutely key in this situation for the reason the gentleman's just said. So what we're seeing is a situation where I think it's fair to say in the first paragraph that, you know, he's been a client for 5 years of the bank, and we understand most of the time he's operated a satisfactory bank account. So what do you think's happened that might have caused this change in his financial situation?
And when he moved,
Yeah, when he moved,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
Now, anyone sitting in the room there ever moved house? Of course you have, yeah? You know, even if you move in and you're renting, what happens? You always have more bills, don't you, than you're expecting, no matter how smart you are at trying to make a budget on what you think it's going to cost you. My experience is it always costs you more than you're expecting. So this move of house, you know, may have caused this situation. But from what the gentleman said a bit earlier, you know, we can't take a guess on this. So what we need to do is move into the budget planner with him. Now, would you try to do that straight away during the interview, or would you say to him, oh, well, here's the form, go away, fill it in, and come back next week or whatever?
I would try to do it during the interview.
Yeah, why?
Because a lot of people aren't necessarily honest when they're filling out budget planners. And if I probe and have a conversation with him, he would probably tend to disclose more. That way I'll have an accurate picture.
Very good. And there's another reason as well, human nature being what it is. If he takes it away, you know, it might not be a week, it might be a couple of weeks or 3 weeks. Or he might, you know, you pester him and he says, oh, I'm sorry, I lost the form. You know, I don't know where I put it, etc., etc. So it's best, if you possibly can, to do it during the interview. Now, the problem with this, of course, is your own time and your time management. And we'll talk more about that under the client relationships module 2. But one of these issues will occur for you, you know, where you're in an interview situation and the interview is going to take longer than you were expecting. So if you can, try and get this filled in during the same time in the interview. Gentlemen at the back, you have to leave?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Out of prior arrangement.
We'll see you next week.
Yes, you will.
Excellent.
Okay. Good day,
So
all.
pick up the recording from Miguel.
Okay.
He puts it on YouTube. So it's easy to access. Okay, so what we need to do is get into this budget plan with him to see if in fact, you know, the first or second options would be the best bet. Other people in the room, how would you feel about making the larger amount to try and clear out his situation and put him onto, you know, a better track going forward? What do you think about that?
I mean, I like option 2 simply because I mean, they said it's going to reduce his monthly commitments by 300,
Yes.
which currently stand at 950. And I mean, then again, I mean, you have to look at a few key options. I mean, key notes that were in the first paragraph. One, he's married. He's not listed whether or not his wife works or not. So that's a pro. A con, he has 2 children, not yet in school, but that calls for future planning.
Yeah, so what age? Yeah, what age are they? And maybe they're going to start school very soon.
Right.
And Mrs. Edwards, maybe she intends to go back to work. So there's a lot of questions that we need to ask. Yeah. Good.
Yeah. So personally, I would go with option 2.
Yeah. So you would look at option 2 quite seriously there, because it's going to clear out the situation. Now, if we went for option 2. What would be one of the key things that we would have to try and get a tight control over, do you think, if we went for option 2?
His spending.
Yeah, his spending, yeah. So again, it comes back to that budget planner and the importance of the budget planner. So if we're going to go, you know, to a lot of trouble trying to help him sort out, you know, some people might use the American expression bailout, you know, bailout his situation as it now stands. Going forward, the last thing that we want is in 2 or 3 weeks' time, you know, he's knocking on your door again saying, oh, you know, you helped me with that $7,000, you know, it was good advice, helped me sort out, but I'm afraid, you know, I'm back into a problem situation. So that would be, you know, a bad thing to happen. So again, the key document again will be this budget planner. So if we did clear him out, and if we did do the budget planner with him, how long do you think you would set before you would have a further review meeting?
Yeah, 6 months.
Well, I think 6 months would actually be a little bit long. I think probably maybe 3 months would be better. You might think that's a bit quick, but 3 months, you know, would be good. We could see how things are working out straight away.
Okay.
You know, 6 months is quite a long time when someone's been having problems. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, under a normal circumstance, I'd agree with you. 6 months or even an annual review would be fine. But when he's got himself into this, you know, bit of a mess, I think from a financial planner perspective, this timescale would be important. And I think a short timescale would show a greater commitment, you know, to the client, and a greater commitment on our part to try and, you know, stay on top of the situation, pick up any early warning signals, you know, things are not quite working out according to plan. So that would be my idea on that.
I have a question.
Yes.
One of the things he said he'd be willing to do would be to give a second mortgage over his house.
Good.
So my question is, in our capacity as financial planners, are we acting in the best interest of the client or the best interest of the employer?
That's a tricky question to answer.
What is what's the exam gonna want? That's more importantly.
Well, the exam is going to want, you know, your opinion on certain situations. Yeah. Now, the situation on this would be that if we went for the larger amount, and if he's prepared to give the bank additional security, I personally would think that's quite a good idea, you know, from the point of view of the financial institution, yes?
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's another thing on this, because what some people have said in the past when we've used this case occasionally before is there's another view on all this. So what's the property worth? We don't know that, do we?
No.
Mm.
So he's telling us there's an equity of 30,000, but we don't know what the property's worth, so we need to find that out. And we don't know what the first mortgage is, so we need to find that out. So what document would we again go back to help us with this second part of our
Balance sheet.
analysis? Yeah, the balance sheet, the personal balance sheet. So that's at this point, so we've been focusing heavily on the income position, quite rightly, and saying, you know, whether this bailout will help him. And don't forget, he's also supposed to be getting an improvement with his job there. Yes?
I mean, well, in relation to the KYC, I don't know if I missed it. We don't actually know what he does.
You don't, but it's about to be promoted in his job, and his salary should increase by $150 a month.
But then I think there's a lot of variables because about to be promoted should increase, and he would say an equity of.
Yeah,
So
okay. Totally
I'm not
agree. So,
happy at the
from a financial,
so what we're trying to do on the values is to do the balance sheet, and we could get evidence of that, couldn't we? Yeah?
we can.
We could get evidence of that. And then same with his job, you know, if you felt it necessary, you could ask him to get a letter from his employer, you know, stating that he is getting this promotion and what his new salary is going to be, yeah? So it depends how deeply you want to go in terms, you know, of the documentation to back up what he's telling us. Now, the other point that I was going to come on to was, he says he has an equity of 30,000. So what's the other idea that you might want to consider. Let's say the property is worth, say, $100,000, and the equity is 30. That means his mortgage is set with the mortgage figures that we are seeing in the document here. Well, we don't know, do we?
Sorry, you were breaking up. Can you just one more time say that?
Okay, yeah. What we're also going to need to do is to find out what his mortgage actually is, yes?
Mm-hmm.
So we can confirm the mortgage payments that he's making at the moment, and we can check those in accordance with the budget planner that we're coming up with. Is that fair comment?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So time and time again, we're going to come back to the C in the Campari. Now, what does the C in the Campari stand for?
Character.
Partly stands for the character of the person. Now, you get a better judgment of this, when you actually meet him, yeah?
Okay.
And you're discussing with him in the interview, you're going to find out, is he just been spending and spending and spending, or has he got himself into a bit of a mess because of this house move, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
What sort of unexpected bills has he had? What do we make of him as a character that we want to find out, in terms of his family life as well, in terms of his job? Because as you say, it says he is about to be promoted, but we're going to need to be sure on this. So all in all, it's a case where we would set out, I believe, to try and help if we can. And why we would do that is because of the opening comments. He's been a client for 5 years. He's married with 2 children, not yet at school, which you pointed out. And for most of the time, he's operated a satisfactory bank account with occasional overdrafts before receipt of salary. So really, it's a good case for a financial planner. It's a good case to try and get alongside the client, try and get a few more facts and figures as to why this has started to happen. And then, using our financial planning hat, can we go forward and try and help him improve his situation with this option 1 or option 2, plus the fact that he's going to be better off in terms of his monthly salary, and he's going to be better off in terms of his commitments for payments, by either option 1 or 2. And that's about as far as we can go, with this case study without actually meeting the client. So any more comments on this as an opening case? Is everybody okay on that?
Okay, just a question. Okay, so would we have, a structured question similar to this on the exam? If so, it seems very opinionated, to come to a definite answer.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, the exam question wouldn't be like this.
Okay.
It could be so-and-so. In the situation of this, would you go for option, A, B, or C? But you would have facts on which you could make a judgment decision.
Okay.
Which is why when Miguel was talking to you about the exam, and then he talked to you about the mock exam, why I prompted you to take the mock exam as many times as you can, yeah?
Okay.
Because then you'll see how these questions are set, and you'll see which ones you can answer instantly. So my view for you, because we don't set the exams, we're the facilitators, and it's a good thing that the examining body is the Chartered Banker Institute in the UK. So they're professional exam writers. They write the exam, which is good because we can't influence the exam, and they can only write the exam questions based on everything in your folder. They can't ask you any questions on anything that is not in your folder, yeah? So that's a good thing. They're totally independent of us. They will write the questions based on your folder. So when you take the exam, my advice would be go through it, answer the questions you know straight away without looking up the folder. Then have a second run, where you're not sure about certain things, and start to look up the answers. Because as Miguel has said, this open book idea, it's good in one way, but it's bad in another, because people have got trapped in the past, you know, flicking through all the pages all the time to try and find each and every answer. That's not a good way to do it. Now, because this is right at the start of the program, the other thing I would urge you to do is, as you complete each module, make your own personal summary, just maybe 1 page or 2 pages of the key things, key points that's in the module, yeah? So again, when you're going to have to look up something that you're not too sure of, you can look at your own summary very quickly without flicking through, you know, pages and pages and pages of materials there. So I hope that answers your question on that. So what we'll do to have another experience is we'll look at a second case study where we'll find a totally different situation. Now this case study is a lady this time, and it's called Jane Brown. Just a few cases further forward. Now you see this is very different. Everybody got it?
Yep.
Yes.
Excellent. So Jane Brown this time is a sales representative for a computer company. He's landed now?
No, I'll ask Miguel for another one.
All right.
What's the name of it?
Jane Brown.
Jane Brown.
Okay, if you could share with the lady next to you until Miguel brings it through. So James Brown, sales representative for a computer company. She's 35 years old, worked for 5 years, had a bank account for the last 3 years. Her monthly salary credit varies with the amount of sales commission she earns, but averages $1,000. In recent months, she's been taking bank overdrafts on her account in anticipation of receipt of salary. The range of her account over the last 12 months has been from $700 overdrawn to $500 credit. Average balance is $120. Mrs. Brown calls to see you. She's in process of getting divorced from her husband and the divorce becoming final next week. The Browns have no children and the clean break divorce settlement has been agreed, and she will receive $30,000. For the past year, she's been living with a new partner, Jack Martin, whom she intends to marry as soon as her divorce is complete. Martin owns the flat in which they are living. Brown and Martin wish to use the divorce settlement monies to buy a 6-month timeshare in a property on a new development in Florida. The timeshare will cost $60,000, provided they can complete the purchase quickly. Thanks, Miguel. They therefore ask to borrow $60,000 immediately, of which $30,000 will be repaid from the divorce settlement. They would expect to pay the residual loan over 10 years from renting out the timeshare when they are not using it. They are willing to give you a mortgage over the timeshare as security. So requirement, analyze the financial position and what would you recommend? And then there's just some notes there on clean break and the timeshare. Okay, so I'll give you a few minutes just to have a little discussion amongst yourselves, and then we'll discuss it in open forum.
Jane focus at all.
She need to focus.
It's a hard
I like rice.
she's her current situation in her employment. She is in overdraft. basically every month.
In anticipation of, so
Mhm.
she's not budgeting properly,
She
like
isn't
she's
budgeting
living
properly.
beyond her means or
Yeah.
something.
She's making less money.
She
Right.
exactly.
Exactly.
So
Jumps up.
she isn't gonna be able to pay the mortgage off once we give it to her. We don't know what this man does,
Right.
No.
Jack.
Mhm.
And if he's willing to give a mortgage over his home, we know more about the bank. If
Right.
you want to give up your house,
Mhm.
maybe you could talk
But
about
then
it.
she's only walking away from the divorce with 30K
Yeah, no, so that'll be.
and into a home that isn't hers.
It's no Jack is gonna have to mortgage his home.
Yeah, definitely.
But then at the end of the day, the mortgage is still in Jack's name because he
Jack has
owned the
mortgage.
home
He's in
before
the
the marriage.
Right.
So
So she's applying the
He's
mortgage by
injecting
herself, is what you're
anything.
saying.
He's
No, so I'm
injecting
saying
anything
if
into
it doesn't work out again, she's walking away.
She's doing everything.
So no, we just it's Jack could sign over his house.
It's her
Yeah.
30,000.
But she's still
and-
walking away with
and-
nothing
and-
if this marriage
and
doesn't work out.
potential.
Yeah, that's our point.
No, I mean, it all depends. The only way that could work like that, I mean, from the law standpoint, is if he has a LLC on that flat. Once they become married, that's together.
Yeah,
that's
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 gonna be
hers.
that's gonna be the house.
That's
I don't
hers.
even need it to be a house. Like
Yeah.
Jack
Once
is
you're married.
guaranteed the house over. Give us the house, Jack, and we could
As long as
consider
that's in his
giving
name.
We
lending
can
you.
consider.
Yeah, all law.
Lending
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Consider it if you're willing to sign over your house.
Jackie
But we don't want the mortgage for the Florida property because there's no guarantee it'll make
Yeah.
money.
But mind
No
you,
way.
there's no, but then it's an income property and it's in
It,
Florida.
the
But we're
hope
in
is that
Florida.
it's going to be an income property.
That's
It
true.
could sit there empty for 6 months.
And you
Exactly.
never know.
Yeah, this is a difficult situation because you know she's going to come in to see you full of expectation, isn't she?
That's all.
You know,
Yeah.
she's going to come in, and we'll discuss this more in the module on relationship skills. But this interview is going to be difficult for you because she's going to come through that door
Mhm.
with great expectation because, you know, she's getting divorced. She's living with this new man who obviously she really likes. She's going to get $30,000 coming in, and they've got this really neat idea. They're buying a timeshare property in Florida, so they'll be living together in Jack Martin's flat, and they'll be going to Florida to live in the timeshare. So it all sounds wonderful, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So her expectation will be that you will say, "Oh yes, that sounds a great idea. You know, here's the $60,000."
No. I'd say no.
I would say no.
No.
I would say no. But if we're gonna do $60,000 on a timeshare, we're putting $30,000 into it. What are we repaying the mortgage back?
Yeah.
It's
So
not
like-
even.
Yeah, exactly.
Salary.
She
So there's
doesn't.
two questions. Yeah, so a very good point, but there's two questions on that. The first one I would suggest is maybe they've agreed $30,000,
Mm-hmm.
but when is she actually going to receive it?
Mhm.
It's not.
Yeah.
You know, we don't know that, do we?
No.
You know, 30,000 might be agreed, but where's the 30,000 going to come from?
Mhm.
You know, is it there to be paid immediately, or is it subject to the sale, you know, of a previous partner, previous husband property? So 30,000 we're not sure of. When is it coming in? Where is it from?
Mhm.
And then the point you've just made is very valid. How can they repay the 30? They're telling us it can be repaid from renting out timeshare when they're not using it.
Mhm.
Do you think that's feasible?
No.
No.
No. Why is it not feasible?
Not when she doesn't have a steady income. That's too much of a risk for her to take right now, especially given that she's not stable in her own spending. Clearly, somehow
It's a
she's
shame
either
you-
overreaching or something's just going on there.
And even in terms of the marriage, if you look here, they say that they want them to go into the 60,000 immediately. So that means that she'd be jumping in with this guy Jack Martin, who she's not married to, according to paragraph 3, because
Yeah.
she won't marry him until the divorce is final. Meaning, she won't marry him until she gets 30 grand. So therefore, she'll be going into the $60,000 commitment into a guy who she's not married to, and she has nothing up front.
I feel like y'all making a lot of harsh judgments on Jane. I'm here for Jane.
Is she-
I think Jane is divorced for a reason.
Getting married
Exactly.
is one thing. That's gonna force her to not wanna
She
get
might,
married.
yeah, she might walk in the room and you think she's a very nice lady,
Yeah.
particularly the men in the room.
Mhm.
So we have to be careful. So as financial planners, you have to remain neutral, don't forget.
Mhm. Mhm.
So we are making harsh judgments, but we might be making sensible judgments to try and help her, because here she's looking as if she's going to try and rush into this thing. Now the timeshare, in my experience, the timeshare will be only a certain number of weeks in a year, won't it?
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, what
You
I
know, we
would,
don't-
It's at 6
Yeah,
months.
we don't know how many weeks it is,
no,
and is there enough weeks
Rented.
to rent it out, at what figure to assist with this $30,000? Then my other question is she allowed to rent it out if they bought the timeshare? You know, is there a restriction on renting the timeshare? Well, we don't know, there might not be, you know, it might be okay. We need to seek a legal opinion on that if it went much further, but the timeshare deal for the moment needs to be put on hold, doesn't it?
Yes.
yes.
Definitely.
What I would suggest
So how
to her,
So how could we try in the interview to try and get just to slow down a bit, yeah?
well, personally, what I would suggest to her, I will go through the budget planner with her and
Good.
suggest that we try to analyze her spending versus her income over a
At the
3
moment.
month, at the moment, over a 3 month
Excellent.
period, like you suggested. And in the interim, to pacify her with the timeshare idea, because you don't want to shut her down. She's just going through a divorce. If she can get some history on the timeshare, if she can
Yes.
get some information as to has it ever been rented before, the time periods it's been rented, the type of rent it's received. Like you said, if it can be rented,
If it can
And
be.
in a 3 month time after we've gone through the budget and see where she is, where she comes back in that
Yes.
3 months with that information and where she is financially, then we can make a decision from there. And hopefully by that time, with her trying to stick to the budget, she will be able to assess for herself whether or not this timeshare is a good idea.
That sounds excellent. Have you done this type of program before?
No.
Yeah, no, that sounds great, because that way we're being helpful, because we're saying, well, just a moment, you know, let's leave this new venture to one side for the moment, and let's try and concentrate on you, you know, as you are now, in the situation you are now, and let's try and help you sort that out. So she's not going to leave the room thinking, goodness, that was a total waste of time. You know, they weren't interested in me. They didn't want to hear what I had to say or anything to do with me. What we're going to do is show helpful advice by trying to help her in her current situation and giving her a little bit of time, hopefully, during this time, this breathing space. When she comes back to see us in 3 months, she still might not have received the $30,000. But she might by then have an idea of when she might get it. And the next thing is, if she said, oh dear, you know, there's been all these delays, I don't think I'm going to get it for another year. Well, you know, well then the opportunity will be when she does get it in that length of time, then because we've got to know her a little bit better, maybe at that time we'll be suggesting to her some type of investment scheme to try and improve her personal income, as opposed to just squandering this $30,000 into this wacky timeshare, yeah?
Yeah.
So I think that would be playing it in a very constructive way, and I think you'd be doing a good job in doing it that way. There's lots of unknowns, as one of the gentlemen was saying. You know, we don't know Mr. Martin. We don't know, you know, if he owns the flat, but we don't know what it's worth. We don't know what mortgage he's got on it. You know, we don't know anything about his personal circumstances. You know, he might be in a terrible state of financial affairs himself. We
Yeah.
just don't know, do we? So we need to find out a lot more about Mr. Martin if we were progressing anyway down this route. Okay, so that's Jane Brown case, which again we'll think a bit more about it when we talk more about the client relationship skills. So let's just go back to the situation analysis part 1, paperwork. So what we've got then is this framework, the Campari, where you can use it to look at the characters of the person, as we're discussing on both cases. So we're on Campari now. And if we think about the stability factor under the character with Mr. Edwards, we think he's quite a stable sort of guy who might have run into some problems with moving property. But when we think about Jane, she's not in a very stable position, is she?
No.
Mentally, she's not in a very stable position, so we have to be very careful here. And then also under the character is their ability to pay debts. And again, that's questionable with Jane, as you were pointing out, because we don't really know, what's happening with her expenditure. So we really need a budget planner to try and get on top of that. What's her ability in terms of her earnings, her professional position, and repayment is questionable, as you've been saying down there. So when you're using Campari, it's quite a good idea to use the chart that follows on the next page, because can you see on this chart it's a bit different, because we have information gained and information required. So that's quite a useful way of structuring it, because we've been discussing this on both cases where we've known certain things, but there's been certain other things we really need to find out. So you can use it in this section like this. And then the next section, we'll come back on a bit later when we start to talk about scoring models on mortgages, what sort of characteristics you can put in there. So we'll leave that just for the moment. And then we're going to talk a little bit about this aspect of monitoring and control, because this again is the situation on the Edwards case, because it's important that we keep on top of this by way of monitoring it. And we were discussing, the length of time before we'd have a review meeting. And in Edward's case, I was suggesting, say, 3 months. So what you're going to need to do on your part is some very accurate recording of what you found out during the interview. We need a good report on file in case you're not around, in 3 months' time when the review is going to take place. We need good information on there, and we're going to need ongoing monitoring of that situation. And that's the first part that we've been looking at. So financial situation analysis part 1, we've been looking at some personal situations, looking at those 2 key documents, the personal balance sheet, seeing what their assets are, what are their liabilities, what's the net worth position, and then looking very closely at their income and expenditure by encouraging them to use this type of budget planner. So what we'll do, we've got another 20 minutes to run, so we'll make a start on the part 2 analysis. So let me try and find the part 2. Okay, right, I've got it on the screen. So we're starting by saying in part 1 we looked at the templates for the financial situation analysis, and in this section we start to look at more complex situations where the clients are reliant on business trading performance for their income ability. Now this could be taken as a salary from the business, or it could be a dividend, or it could be both. It depends on the business structure. So we'll begin our analysis by looking at some key areas of business performance. So we're going to start, by thinking of small businesses and small business situations. So what's the key assessment areas that we'll be looking at? Well, we'll be looking at the client, and the particular business that they have. What's the asset structure in the business? So again, that's looking at the balance sheet. And is there any collateral that's been offered to the bank? If they've got debts, what's the repayment ability from the business, the serviceability of the debts, and how can we monitor the business performance, if we feel it's necessary because of the source of income with the client that we're dealing with. So here's a key assessment area chart. And what I'm suggesting here is we should look at this diagram very carefully to avoid pitfalls of client evaluation with little regard to the business, its net worth, or serviceability, or if it's got a strong asset structure, that's a very good thing, but be careful because that doesn't necessarily generate serviceability of debt or generate investment ability, because that will come from profitability and it'll come out of cash flow. So that statement there is very important, so you might want to highlight that we've got to be careful in looking at all of these areas, not just the balance sheet, but also the income statement, and then a bit later we look at the cash flow. So if you want to make a note on that page 1 there, that the 3 key documents when we're looking at small businesses, medium businesses and large businesses will be the balance sheet. We'll be looking for the income statement. Some people still call it, the trading and profit and loss account, but generally it's now known as the income statement. And then the third document is the cash flow statement, which will be very important because it will show us, where the cash is coming from and where the cash is being used, and whether in fact there's any surplus position in terms of the cash flow from the business or not. And that would be very important to look at. So what I've got there on the second paragraph on that second page is a statement, again, that's worth highlighting. It's vitally important to remember that a business, no matter how strong its balance sheet, cannot carry a debt burden greater than can be serviced by the income earning capacity of this business. And you'll see this time and time again, where lenders have slipped into the trap of looking at a business and saying, oh, this business has got lots of assets, let's take some security, some collateral, with little regard to whether the income and the cash flows of the business will be able to service the debt. So sooner or later, that business is going to run into problems, and sooner or later they're going to be coming in to see somebody like you to try and help them sort out the situation, which is not an asset value situation, it's actually a trading situation, yeah? So the balance sheet, again, will show us assets and liabilities, but it doesn't show us the actual trading of the business, and that's what we've got to get close to as financial planners, so we can understand, where the income is coming from. If the income's coming from business to pay the person that's sitting opposite to you. So we'll be placing great emphasis on understanding the trading profile of the business, which will be displayed in the profit and loss account or the income statement, and it'll be projected in the profit budget and the cash flow budget. So there's 2 budgets there. So if you want to underline that part, 2 main budgets that we'll look at a bit later on will be the profit budget and the cash flow budget. Some people call these the profit budget and the cash flow forecast. So it's just exactly the same thing. Cash flow forecast is the same as a cash flow budget. Okay, now on to the next page, some essential requirements, just as we looked at in the first section. So in exploring these points, the cash flow forecast will tell us the business income streams and what's to be done with the money and what's required to fund the differences, if there are any. Yeah? or if there's a surplus, what can be used in terms of investments. The plans for dividend payment and repayment of debt will be illustrated in the cash flow forecast, and the feasibility of these payments will be shown by looking at margins available in the profit together with the record of past profits from the audited accounts. So there's just one word to add there. Where it says looking at any margin available in the profit, it should say in the profit budget, together with the record of past profits in the audited accounts. The investment margin, or the buffer, or net worth, is illustrated in the past annual accounts and in any projected balance sheet. So here's the third document coming in terms of projections. So just backtracking for a second, we said when we're looking at businesses, we're looking for the balance sheet, we're looking for the income statement, and we're looking for the cash flow statement. When we're looking at projections, we're looking for the income projection or profit projection. We're looking for the cash flow projection or cash flow forecast, and we're looking for the projected balance sheet. The projected balance sheet you'll hardly ever get. You'll get more frequently a projected income statement and a projected cash flow. So where do we start? Well, we start, again, you can write against this KYC. So what's the technical ability of the client that we're looking at? So a key feature of financial situation business analysis is the technical ability of the client. You know, can they perform the tasks that's required? Now, here's a very simple example. You know, if it's a car mechanic, can they repair, you know, you take your car in for repair, can they repair it effectively? You know, we've all had the experience where you take your car in for repair, and when it comes out, it's worse, isn't it? Worse than when you took it in. So you're just wondering what the hell's been going on. Or you take the car in for servicing, it's been running okay, and it comes out worse than it did when you took it in for a service. What about builders? What about plumbers? You know, what about bricklaying? What about building inspectors? Now we're coming down to something more serious. Building inspectors and surveyors. Have you seen just the breaking news over the weekend, that terrible fire in the UK? Have you seen that?
Yeah.
That block of flats?
Mm-hmm.
Terrible. The death count's up to 27 people now, and they haven't found out yet, but the suspicion is when this block of flats was refurbished some years ago, somehow when they were installing this refurbishment material, it wasn't put in place properly. So each flat or each apartment in this huge building wasn't like separated in terms of a fire break. And what's happened is when the fire started, it just got shot right throughout the whole building. So there's going to be a terrible inquiry in terms of what the surveyors, what the building inspectors were doing in certifying that work has been carried out satisfactorily. So it's going to be a serious inquiry. You've had a similar thing in Nassau, haven't you, with the Bahama Hotel?
Oh yeah.
What happened there? The building work stopped?
No, it's continued now.
Now it's continuing now, that's good. So it's finally got signed off.
Yeah.
But there was a question over the quality of some of the building materials, I understand.
Still is a question over some of the quality.
It still is.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So the new investors are going to have to go back over the work to make corrections.
Gosh, that's going to cost a lot, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So who are the new investors, do you know?
No, it's still in liquidation.
It's still in liquidation.
Yeah,
Okay.
what's it called? Raymond Weiner still have it. Deloitte still has it.
Yeah,
They didn't sign
they
it.
file under an American
What's it
system,
called?
don't they? Fire
CF.
protection.
Ca-
The chapter 10 or chapter
CTF,
11.
the
Yeah.
ones who have some kind of like deposit on it.
Oh, okay.
It's
Yeah.
not signed. Deloitte still has it. Yeah.
Okay.
So these starting points, you know, again, whether it's small, medium, or large, are very important. And what's the technical ability of the people that you're dealing with, and then the integrity again. So a checklist approach could be helpful for you. How long has the client been known? What's the track record? If they've not been known to you before, why is the client making an approach to you? Now it could be because they've heard, these guys from Ansbacher are really, really good, so they're coming along to you because of that. Or, is there another situation that they don't want to reveal? So it's important to try and find out, why they're coming along to us. Can evidence be shown of an acceptable track record elsewhere? It's an important point. Does the client have business experience, especially in the area of trade? Now, you find this a lot, and we talk more about it, when you get involved in situations that we call a business startup. So here's a new startup idea, and people come in to discuss their business plan with you. What experience have they had in this type of business? It could be two guys who've been, having a drink in the bar, and they come up with what they think is a really good idea, and next day they think they'll go into business. Do they have experience, or do they have the skills? We all want to support new businesses, because new businesses, help the economy. The development of new businesses is very, very important. But unfortunately, new businesses have a very high failure rate. Why? Because of this. People thinking it's a good idea, but they don't have experience. On this, particularly I would suggest in tourism, where in tourism, lots of people want to open a small hotel or a bed and breakfast establishment, but do they have the skills, dealing with the people to keep it successful? Because it's hard work, isn't it? Mm-hmm. It's hard work when people are coming to stay, in your property, to keep them, satisfied, because people can be very difficult, particularly over the accommodation, particularly over the food. Yes.
Yes.
They want good service. Next bullet point: what's the client worth financially, and how has their personal worth been accumulated? Oh wow! Now that's easy for me to type out and put in your notes, but boy oh boy, that's a hard one to find out, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Particularly where has the worth been accumulated from? And what we're seeing in the UK is we're seeing what we call second generation business people. Do you know what I mean by that? Second generation. Yeah. It's where the first generation might be quite an entrepreneurial person, a man or lady, who had this really good idea. They started the business, they're the lead generation, and the business is successful, albeit in very difficult times, and they become very wealthy. But then, of course, the second generation who are coming in, if it's a family business, what particular skills do they have? Now, it might be second generation persons that's coming in to see you for financial advice. And this could be quite a tricky situation, because although they have a large amount of money, they might have no idea how to preserve that capital. So as this course progresses, you'll see during the later modules, there'll be much more, on investment planning, investment management, how you manage your portfolio, etc., with the view to the words I would use: capital preservation, to trying to preserve the capital. So under this point here, what's the client worth financially, and how has the personal worth being accumulated? I'd write against that, is it inheritance? Yeah. Is it inheritance? Is it a business inheritance situation? Now the next point is important, where the client that you're discussing with is a director of a company, and they've given a guarantee to the bank. So we're going to need to know about this. It's an important thing to make a note of. If the business runs into trouble, has the director given a guarantee? And if so, for how much is the guarantee against the business?
I'm sorry, not to interrupt you. When we were talking about what is the client's financial worth. You mentioned
Yep.
a term. You said capital preservation. Thank you.
Yes, yes. So here's a client, probably of second generation family business. And they're sitting with you, and the good news is when you are talking about their net worth position, you know, they might have $10 million, they might have $100 million, but they haven't worked to achieve that, yeah?
Yeah.
You know, they've got that from being in a family business as a successor. Now, I'd suggest to you in your career as a financial planner, this is going to be quite difficult because this person may have no financial acumen, skills whatsoever. They've only got this money because father left it to them, yeah?
Okay.
Or mother left it to them. So this is what we're trying to get at here, is what's the client worth financially and how has the personal worth been accumulated? Now, if the person you're sitting opposite has worked to achieve this money, I would suggest to you that's a totally different interview mindset to the one where it's second generation. Now, I'm only making this point at this stage because a bit later, when we're talking more about the client relationship skills, we're going to come back to this, yeah?
Okay.
So it'll be a different way that you'll be managing this type of relationship, you know, as an opening to the meeting. So that's all I'm saying for the moment. Is that okay?
Yes.
Yeah, please interrupt me all the time because, you know, that's the benefit of any type of program like this, whether we're online or the lecture is face-to-face with you. You know, the whole idea is to ask as many questions as you want.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Great.
Okay, so there's a starting point on that. We'll finish there at page 3. So we're right on time for midday. Now, what I'd like to do before we meet next week is just have a quick, you know, flip through the documents that we've been looking at. And then when we meet next week, we can start with a quick, you know, question and answer session on what we've covered so far. You know, that you might have no problems, no issues, because it's been quite straightforward so far. And then we'll start to move into some business analysis, which I think you'll find is very interesting. And I can assure you that the business analysis that we do will work on any business, whether it's small, medium, or large. It's just when we look at some of the larger businesses, there are some additional things that we would take to account. But the basic principles on a small business or medium would be exactly the same. So thanks very much for coming on, giving up your Saturday morning.
Thank you too.
And hope to see you next Saturday. So the reception's been quite good. We had a little bit of downtime with the signal, but generally it's been quite clear.
Yes,
Yes,
it
yes.
has been.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
You too. Enjoy.
Enjoy your afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye for now. Bye everybody.
Alright, folks. I will see you next week. Or Monday, actually.
Monday, exactly. Alright, yeah.
The breakup, they go smooth. How is it?
Just one or two more breaks.
Okay.